This is muscovado sugar.
Because that angered Washington.
And in the 18th century,
Lee
almost all the sugar until the beginning of the Federalist period, 1790s, was this kind of sugar. Looks like brown sugar today. But it would come into the colonies wrapped in blue paper, and everything had a wax stamp on it because the British government taxed everything.
So that's a tax stamp?
This is a seal stamp with T. Townsend and Company's the company that brought it in, but they would, when you bought this, you would pay a surcharge. So if the sugar was, let's just say it was $1, you would have to pay $1.05 or something.
Oh, okay.
But this is the same thing, only a little bit smaller. And this is very heavy in molasses. So, but they would use this in their oatmeal, anything they wanted to sweeten. They'd use it in coffee, tea, hot chocolate. Hot chocolate was one of the favorite drinks in the 18th century. So the hot chocolate isn't like we drink today. It was extremely thick. And a lot of people, me included, put cayenne pepper in hot chocolate. It's excellent. So you sprinkle a little of that in there with a little of muscovado sugar, and away you go. And then white sugar started to come in to the colonies, like I said, 1790, 1795, somewhere in there. And in order to get that off, you could bust a piece off with a knife, or you could grate it, and then it falls into that pan. You throw it in many different kinds of graters, just wood block with a tin, and it decorated in the back a little bit.
They didn't know the answer. So when I went to Yorktown.
So, but again, this is the maker's mark or the importer's mark here. Different things like this vise here that was used to repair firearms. This is British. You've got the broad arrow right here. I don't know if you can see that. But these right here designate that's the British government. This is an original piece from 1750. So, and this was used, you put this on your prison spring, tighten it down, and compress the spring so you could repair it. And then inside these guns, inside the lock, there's a long mainspring. It's about this long, very, very heavy. So you'd need a heavy one like this to get those things out to repair them. And the military had armorers that would repair the firearms like this. This is military. This is civilian, so you repaired your own firearms, or you took it to a local gunsmith. But he would have these kind of bracelets.
Are the guns reproductions, or are they?
They're all handmade reproductions. Yep. Yeah. Originals you'd never bring outside. A gun like this in this condition would be probably $150,000.
Oh.
A gun like this would probably be $60,000 to $70,000. This is a light infantry British musket. If you want to hold it, weighs 9.5 pounds.
Okay, it's a little heavy.
So it's 66 caliber and it's 42-inch barrel. This was used by the light infantry, or what we call today skirmishers. They went out in front of the army they'd go out until they started taking fire from the Continental Army. And so they were way out in front of the army, like 100 yards. And they would start returning fire and wait for the rest of the army to come up to it. This particular firearm is a private gun. That weighs 63 pounds.
Okay, that's much lighter, yeah.
So this is a gun that a gun like this, not this particular gun because there are thousands of different styles. A gun like that would, just about everybody in the colonies would have some kind of smooth bore. Because you had to hunt, you had to defend your family, especially if you lived in Philadelphia, Boston, New York, you might have a gun, you might not. A lot of people did, but you didn't need them because you didn't have to go kill your food. They had open air markets. You'd walk down to an open air market that'd be on the corner of Wall Street, and you would buy your food and take it home. When you live 5, 6, 7 miles outside of town, or 10 miles, that's a day's travel. So now you don't have that luxury, so you have to go kill your own food. The other problem in the colonies, wasn't a problem, but all males that were 16 to 60 were by law in the militia. You had no choice. You were in the militia. Now, if you were wealthy and you had a slave, the slave could go in your stead. If you were a judge, a constable, certain physicians didn't have to be, they were exempt. So, by law, you had to meet once a year for the militia to muster. Every town had one. So, in time of war, like when Lexington and Concord happened, all the militias were immediately called up. So you grabbed all your gear, and let's say I have my wife, a daughter, my son, and myself. He's 17. When they call that, he grabs his musket, half a pound of powder and 20 round ball shot. I grab mine, grab the clothes on our back, pack our stuff, and we leave. We may not come back for 6 years. We may not come back for a week. We may never come back because we're dead. So
The fact that you had
your family that lives 10, 15 miles outside the city, your wife and your daughter, they all had to know how to fire these guns. They had to know how to load and fire these muskets.
They had to take
Because they had to take care of themselves. When you're around Philadelphia, not a big deal. When you're 20 miles outside of Fort Pitt, which is now Pittsburgh, big deal. Because that is the frontier, man. There is no civilization over there. Probably 50 miles west of Philadelphia was frontier. So on the frontier you still had to go find your own, kill your own food, but you also had Indians that weren't real happy over there. Some of the Indians were allied with the Americans, some were allied with the British. Well, if you're in your cabin, you know, my daughter and my wife, and you look out the front window and there's 15 painted natives coming to your door, they're not coming to say, how are you today? I'd like to get some lemonade. They're coming to kill you or take you prisoner more than likely for home. So you had to be able to load and fire these things to protect yourself. Or you gave up, in which case you were either adopted into the tribe, you were killed, you were sold off as a slave. You know, Indians had slavery just like the whites had slavery. You know, everybody had slavery. So you had to know how to use these. And if your husband and your son were in the militia and they were, you know, let's say after Lexington and Concord, they're in the militia, they're gone. You know, they might be at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which really happened on Breed's Hill. It never happened on Bunker Hill, but that's another story. So you're in that battle, you might get killed.
That's the only place I've been able to find that.
And your wife and daughter might never know what happened to you. No idea. No. So
I have a question for
Yes.
you. I know there were women that fought in the Civil War. Were there very many women that fought in the Revolutionary War?
Julie, who do you portray?
Deborah Sampson.
Deborah Sampson. She's portraying Deborah Sampson. There were women that fought in the Revolutionary War. She's the most famous.
Okay.
And but they wouldn't know that there were women until they got wounded, and they went into the medical tent, which also was the barber's tent when they weren't in battle. The barbers were the surgeons, usually in the army. So
she asked the question, were there women that fought in the Continental Army?
Yeah. I was just expanding. You can go ahead.
Well, Deborah Sampson was born in 1760 in Massachusetts. She was the oldest of 6. In 1768, her father abandoned the family and her mother had no choice but to sell the children into indentured servitude. So she served lastly for a man named Jeremiah Thomas. He was an educated man, so he made sure that she was educated as well, which was very rare for women in that time. She could read and write. At the age of 18, she had finished her service, and she kind of bummed around for a while, taught school, did some weaving and sewing to make money. And in May of 1782, she enlisted in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, under the name of Robert Shirtliff.
She was just outside.
Her name and her signature is still on file with the Massachusetts Historical Society.
She's inside, I'm sure.
She accepted 60 pounds bounty for her enlistment.
How's Charlie?
And she was sent with the light infantry unit of the 4th Massachusetts Regiment. Light infantry unit was highly trained. They specialized in forward reconnaissance, flank coverage, that sort of thing. She was trained in West Point, and her commanding officer was General John Patterson. In April of 1783, in July of 1782, she was injured in battle. And so as a result of that injury in April of 1783, she was made General Patterson's aide-de-camp, which means she cleaned his shoes and she served his meals and she carried his messages and all that sort of stuff. In April of 1783, there was a final uprising, in Philadelphia, and her unit was sent there to put that down. She caught a camp fever. Actually, more people died from camp fevers than they did from wounds during the Revolution. The doctor who treated her was Barnabas Binney, and when he disrobed her to treat her fever, he found her secret. So he took her to his home, and he and his wife nursed her back to health, at which point he gave her a letter and required her to return it to her commanding officer so that he would know that she was a woman. He read the letter and never said a word. Men had been drummed out of camp, they had been lashed, they had been hanged in the Continental Army for less than that, and he never said a word. When they were finally sent back to West Point in October of 1783, on the 25th of October, she was honorably discharged as a soldier having served her unit faithfully. And then he gave her 20 pounds to get home with. She still had to get back to Massachusetts. She got married in 1785, had 3 kids, adopted a 4th, but had a really hard time. Starting in 1802, she started dressing up in her uniform and parading around for money. The Massachusetts government had put her on their invalid roll in 1792, but it was $4 a month, which doesn't amount to much. In 1804, she asked her friend Paul Revere to write a letter for her to the Massachusetts government and also to the Congress in Washington asking for a pension. Because she served. She was honorably discharged, why not? It took the Massachusetts government a little while, but they added her, they gave her a lump sum of $34. It's not much. It took the U.S. government until 1816 to decide to give her her money. But it was $76.44 a month, which was enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. But that $76.44 a year allowed her to live comfortably, pay back her debts, but it also made her the first female to be fully military pension from the U.S. government. She died from yellow fever on May 29th, 1827. Her husband died in 1838. When he died then, her children got a lump sum survivorship benefit of $466. So she actually got more after she died than she did when she was alive.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
There are statues in her honor in various places in Massachusetts. So,
Wet
out.
was, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Thank you very much.
French Charlemagne musket, as well as the French Chile, the British use the brown vest, plus the fowlers that we use, as well as what's misnown as Kentucky long rifle.
This is Mary Johnson, and she's a public librarian. This is the director.
In the 18th century, warfare was done in the open field in straight lines by the European armies. Initially, at the onset of the Rev War, the American soldiers very rarely wanted to meet the English army in the open field in straight lines. But we will drill and go through the process of priming and loading and discharging a weapon. The weapons are flintlocks. Some are muskets, some are fowlers. They also had flintlock rifles. A good musketman will be able to load and fire 3 times in a minute. Company, prime and load. Because of the flintlock, because the dental hygiene is bad at its best in the 18th century, the first step of loading a musket is to take out a cartridge, tear it open with your teeth. You cannot see the infantry. No such thing as weapons. The infantry is all right hand. Maneuver with the weapons done with the right hand. Go and shoulder their muskets. Company will advance, march! Take care, halt! Company, make ready! Take aim! Fire! Prime and load! Once again, on the European-style battlefield, which the Americans will eventually adapt as their training in Valley Forge trained them to become accustomed. We are firing at an enemy that could be 20 yards away from us. When we are reloading, they're shooting at us. When we are firing at them, they're reloading. Company, make ready! Take aim! Fire! Prime and load! The ranks of men on the field, short guys in front, tall guys in back, first in front of you, drop Make ready. Take aim. Fire. Company. Shoulder. Fire lock. Company. To the right wheel. Mark. Front. Take care. Halt. Company. Order. Arm. Company. At ease.
When a young lady came of courting age, which was 13 or 14, the young man who wanted to court her had to spend the evening in the parlor with her father and her mother. And the father determined how much time he spent using the courting candle. When the candle burned down to the first rung, the time he had to court was done. So if it was a young man who was a wastrel and spent his time in the taverns, he wouldn't get very much time. Well, maybe he was a little better behaved young man. He worked hard, but he still, went to the tavern on the weekends. Maybe he'd get half a candle. The young man who kept his nose to the grindstone, went to services on Sunday, saved his money, he could stay for an entire candle.
Oh, that's neat. Sorry, so how long would it take to burn the...
It depends. If it was wax, it would burn faster. If he really liked the young man, he could beeswax out, because that lasts forever. So the father was quite, had a quite weighty opinion who his daughter would marry, because the father paid the dowry. The money belonged to the young woman, but her husband administered it. The dowry was her money, but she had no control.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that's interesting.
What is this? I'm curious.
That is a leech. Leeches were a big part of 18th century medicine. 18th century medicine was all about balancing humors. Blood, black bile, yellow bile, or phlegm. So if you had a sore throat, and the surgeon, who was also the barber, looked down your throat and saw a lot of red. Oh, you must have an excess of blood. So he could use a leech, or he could use a bleeding bowl. Put a phlegm over a vein, tap it, and then bleed out. There were also emetics if you had too much yellow bile, make you throw up. If you had too much black bile, might give you a clyster or an enema. If you had too much phlegm, you could chop up and fry onions and then put them in linen over your chest. So it was all about balancing your humors. One of the most drastic humor balancing implements, it's called a blistering iron, and its name tells you what it's done for. They heat the blister end to red hot and then touch it on bare skin in a fleshy area, and then use the phlegm to open the blister to let the ill humors come out. You bleed the bad blood out, drain the ill humors. It was all about balancing humors.
That's interesting.
Well, this is the Colonel Crawford story. This is kind of
Anything else on the table that you're interested in?
This here?
This? Yeah. That could be used as medicine. It's tobacco. You could chew it up and put it on a wound, or you could smoke it in a clay pipe. A gentleman might go down to the tavern of an evening and not have his own pipe, but from the tavern owner, he could rent a clay pipe, buy some tobacco, smoke his pipe. And while he was at the tavern, he needed to be careful. A stranger might come up and say, "Excuse me, may I buy you a drink?" And if unsuspecting, you may take the drink it down, and in the bottom, you'll find a king's shilling when you get to the bottom. If you take the king's shilling, even unwittingly, you have just been drafted into the king's army or spirited away. If he also put something in the drink to make you a little sleepy, you could wake up the next morning on a ship several miles out. It was a lifetime commission, all the lashes you could take, so unless you ran away, you were stopped. So legend has it that tavern owners got tired of losing their customers, so they started investing in class bottom tavern legend. And that way, if someone came up and said, "Sir, let me buy you a drink," you could say, "No, thank you."
What's the story of this?
That is a Spanish real. And if you came to me, if I was a storekeeper, and you wanted to buy something, and you had a Spanish real, and I said, well, it only costs half of a Spanish real, we'd cut it in half, and we'd give you the change. And if someone, the next person came in and they needed something, and I needed to give them change, I could give them a quarter real or an eighth of a real. These are pieces of 8. People didn't make pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. I mean, you had pennies and you had larger coins, but if you needed to make change, you cut the coin and made change. So you may have a pocket full of pieces of 8.
How about this?
That's the 18th century version of a Bic lighter. It's a flint and steel. I have kind of dull flint out because I don't want anybody to cut themselves, but there was a spark. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's how you started a fire.
A handful of dollars.
An 18th century book, 18th century lunchbox. A soldier would get a full day's ration, which would be beans, rice, meat if you were lucky, vegetables, and the entire day's amount of food was in the tent. Women and children that were with the Army got half a day's ration.
Okay.
Women followed their husbands into the Army because they had no income of their own. If my husband goes off and joins the Army, my income just went with the Army, and so the children and I would follow behind. We were camp followers. We were part of the baggage, and we stayed with the baggage wagons. And to make extra money so we wouldn't starve, I would work in the hospital, I would wash laundry, do various chores around the camp to make extra money. And my children would grow up doing the same thing. And then when my son was 10, he could be drafted into the Army as a drummer boy. Drummer boys made more money than privates did. But that was because to give orders to the troops, the sergeant couldn't yell loud enough to be heard over the horses and the guns and the cannons. So the drummer boy stood next to the officer giving orders and would say, "Play advance." Over everything you could hear the drum beat. So, and would advance, play retreat, they play retreat. So the easiest way to get an army to get into confusion is to take down the officer or the drummer boy. And the drummer boy had beautiful white leather straps right over his heart carrying his drum. So they would try to put the drummer boys on the ground. Then when they were 16, they could become privates. A little less dangerous, but less pay also.
Yeah.
Military-wise, women had to follow all the same rules the soldiers did. They belonged to the Army. They weren't part of the Army, but they belonged to it. So you couldn't drink, smoke, spit, swear too much in the camps. Women lived separately from their husbands. They lived with their families in a separate part of the camp.
Another day in Wooster, right?
And if women did not do what they were told to do, if they didn't wash the clothes and they didn't do the chores around the camp, they could be drummed out of camp. If I'm from the Pennsylvania Territory and in New York, the sergeant who's in charge of the women decides that I'm not being very well behaved, he could drum me out of camp and I'm stuck with my children in New York. And if my husband dies, I have 3 days to find another husband or I'm drummed out of camp.
25 yards,
That's tough.
50 yards a man.
Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you want to look at it, a lot of women died in the camps. Same things they died of at home.
Right.
Well, there's no
Fire,
rifling,
camp
so
fever, childbirth. So there was usually a soldier around who had 6 children and no woman to take care of them, and a woman who had 3 or 4 children and her husband died, so they would marry out of convenience.
Oh yes, yeah, there were rifles.
Women's life was.
I'm gonna break my.
It probably wasn't a whole lot worse in the camps than it was at home, other than they had to keep moving. They were with the baggage wagon, so it was a little bit of safety. It was the last part of the Army train that would get attacked. but there were women that took over their husband's cannon position. Molly Pitcher is the name that they used for all women that did that. Husband fell, and because Molly knew her husband's position, she was able to take over his part of the cannon. So, and otherwise women would carry water onto the field and care for the wounded afterwards, help the surgeon.
Also makes rifles.
So they were a very important part of the Army. In the beginning, General Washington didn't want them there. George Washington started out as militia. He was a British militiaman, and he wasn't used to women being in the camps. When he raised his army, there were poor women, men from every station in life joined the army. Poor women had to go with their husbands, and Washington didn't know what to do with them. He hadn't dealt with women of that class before, and he really wanted them gone. The husbands said, "If you kick my family out of camp, I will leave." And they were volunteers. At the end of their term of enlistment, they could have left. But Washington was in a quandary about what to do with the women right up until the first case of camp fever broke out. Rather than taking men-at-arms off the line to care for the sick, they compelled the women to work in the hospital, which was a dirty, stinky, bloody job, but it allowed them to stay and allowed them to be paid at a higher rate. Working in the hospital had stamps, books, newspapers, playbills, anything with stamps on it was taxed. Which is why 18th century playing cards look a little different than ours today. Okay? No back and no number, because that costs an extra stamp. And if you didn't know that was a 4 of hearts, you should be gambling anyway.
Exactly.
We were taxed on those items, whereas the other British citizens who lived across the pond, actually in Britain, were not taxed on those items. We didn't mind being taxed. We were British citizens. We understood the need to pay taxes. However, we did not understand the need to pay extra taxes. Well, the king felt that he had done us a great service by protecting us during the French and Indian War, and therefore wanted paid back. So he taxed us on stamps, tea, and sugar. We started using sugar and started using maple syrup and honey. We started making our own tea. We really couldn't stop stamping things or buying things with stamps on them, so we cut down on the amount of stamps as much as we could.
There was also taxes placed on glass, paint, and lead as well, which, if you could afford those 3 items, you'd have had to be extremely wealthy living in the colonies anyways. You needed lead for bullets, paint. If you lived in a cabin, you didn't have anything that you painted. We're talking about people who were well-to-do living in Williamsburg, Albany, New York, Philadelphia, Boston.
And hardly anyone had glass windows or anything at that
Well-to-do,
point.
large estates in the southern colonies or up north.
Very, very sharp. And it was used for
the common man, no.
You could clean vegetables.
Of course, the makeup the women wore this time contained more poison than anything.
Most militia
Was there lead in the makeup?
Yes, there was.
Was there mercury in it?
What did they wear?
They would wear
Eye makeup?
This
powder and a kind of foundation, but that's where the lead
is called
was.
borax.
Got lead poisoning from that. Hat makers, have you heard the term mad as a hatter?
Yeah.
It's because they used mercury
For the
to loosen
headband
the
inside.
band in the hat. And so mercury poisoning, you became mad as a
And
hatter.
this side here
Oh, that's
was used for
interesting.
chopping wood, and this could also
Heard the term lock, stock, and barrel?
Yeah.
That's how weapons could be sold. You could either buy just the wooden part, or you could buy it locked, stock, and barrel.
Oh, that's interesting.
And if you load your musket, as you saw us demonstrate, and we pull the trigger, it goes poof instead of bang, you're flashing a pan.
This is a British light
It
infantry.
means the hole that's in the pan is blocked, so you didn't get the discharge. But if
That around
you're
all day.
not talking no action, you're flashing the pan.
9¾ pounds.
Which
If
is
you are,
Very
if you're
heavy.
maybe 35
So the
plus and
average
older, you'll
soldier in the
recognize
18th
that.
century carried
if
80
you were a
pounds
very
gear on their
important
backs,
person,
muskets.
everybody
the
that
average
had
person
some
in
money
the
wore a
18th
wig.
century
Everyone had lice. So the very, it just was a fact
Oh,
of
yeah.
life. Very
This
rich
is a-
person would
this
have
is
their
a
head
military
shaved
gun.
and have a wig
This
made out of
is
bought borrowed hair. somebody else's hair. And they would powder the wigs also to keep the lice down. And the more wealthy you were, the more hair you could buy. So if you were a very, very important person, you were a big wig because you had English hair.
Oh, that is, you need to have a book of all those things.
And if you were had a higher opinion of yourself than anybody else did, you were a dandy.
target, you can, you know,
Dandy. Stuck a feather in his hat and caught a macaroni.
If you were a Yankee, you're a Yankee, you're a stubborn New England. British look down
Bullheaded,
upon them.
insolent.
A doodler is someone who pretends to do something. Dandy, someone pretending to be better than he was. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. A pony is not a horse, it's a small animal.
A real man rides horses.
Stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Well, Yankee Doodle was pretending to be a gentleman and put a feather in his hat and tried to be a dandy. Where did the macaroni come in? Young men of wealthy families in Britain had discovered Italy, and they discovered pasta. They called all pasta macaroni. So if you were pretending to be a dandy, you would know what macaroni was, and you would pretend to be someone who could eat macaroni. So the first line of Yankee Doodle Dandy is a real insult to the Americans.
Made out of leather, most of them.
We liked the tune though, so we wrote on all verses.
Actually, the song Yankee Doodle is based on a poem that was written by a British soldier, an officer in 1758 during the 7 Years' War. He was sitting in a tavern drinking an ale in Boston, saw the American civilian militia drilling on the Boston Commons. It was a rather humorous sight, so he penned a poem in which every verse of the poem makes fun of Americans Yankee Doodling. And they put it to the tune of an English drinking song. Now, when the Americans read the poem, they did not like it because it was making fun of them. But they liked the tune. So they adopted the song, the tune, and they came up with 15 verses of the poem themselves. And it became the unofficial fight song of the Continental Army. George Washington liked the tune as men did, so at Yorktown, when the British were surrendering, we played Yankee Doodle. The British knew why we were playing. They knew we had adopted it as our song because we changed our own verses to it. But we were Yankee Doodles, and yet we were good enough to defeat George Cornwallis's army.
And this has
And as a
way that has
madam, putting my best foot forward.
Oh, men were judged, their men's beauty was judged on the shape of their calves. If a calf looked like this, he might want to pat it a little bit. So, wealthy person could get, a custom-made calf. A poor person, man would just get a piece of pork and put it back there. And if you really put a pork.
Oh, I think it's a piece of pork.
It had the dogs chasing it.
And maybe he could only afford to have one cork. So when he went to meet a beautiful young lady he wanted to impress, he would put the corked leg or his best foot forward.
Oh, we forgot to mention, if you're a single woman and you're looking for a prospective husband, you would wear your
Shift
bare your
down to your
shoulders.
shoulders.
That was a symbol to single men that you were looking.
You could be 13 or 14 and ready to court.
And the wider hips you had was a misnomer because it presumed that you were going to be able to produce many babies.
And you could fake that too. They were called panniers. You could put something under your petticoat to make your hips fat.
What does it mean?
It's a carryover from medieval Europe. It was part of the chin protection of armor worn by medieval knights. And as we progressed into the future, became a vanity piece of European officers that were adopted by the American officers of the Continental Army.
So it's like a rank piece?
It's a necklace. To a Native American with a bow and arrow, it's a beautiful target. It fits conveniently over my heart.
They were out west.
And I'm a sergeant, so my gorget is brass. To a colonel, general, or major, it could be made out of gold or silver.
Spice-wise came
So to a Native American with a rifle or bow and arrow,
It's a target.
But this was the most important part
to go from
of
England
his accoutrements as a
to,
soldier.
let's
This
say,
is the
China
rum
and back to
ration.
England.
shot glass.
3-year voyage.
To celebrate certain occasions,
It
such
was
Christmas or a great
very
victory,
expensive.
General
West
Washington
Indies,
issued
just
rum
off the
rations.
Caribbean. They'd bring it up, the East
Not
Coast
that
of the
often, but
colonies,
we didn't win a lot of
bypass
battles.
But you wanted it where you could get it very
Georgia was the
quickly.
first colony, and then,
haversack.
New England colony. So most of it
He
came
keeps
from
his
that
personal
area.
items.
This is
Because
called
there are,
haversack.
I have pockets in
What
my
this is,
waistcoat, but there are no
is
pockets in pants in the
soldiers
18th
would
century.
carry this
Even if you have work
over their
pants that are
shoulder,
long, such
and
as
you could have everything
Deborah-
that you
Sergeant
wanted to get to real
Private
quick.
Schutler,
You would
Schutler
put
is wearing.
in a haversack.
Excuse me,
So
Corporal
your
Schutler.
pipe, your tobacco,
Those
fire
pants would have been
starting kit,
appropriate for
maybe
the
an extra
Continental
pair of
Army.
socks,
But again, no pockets.
an apple,
So the
like
haversack
you
is
find an apple,
necessary
potato,
to carry
anything
personal
that you
or
wanted to
needed
get to quick,
items.
you'd have it here. You'd carry a
They
compass
both have
in
neck
here.
stocks on.
And then these two
Precursor
things
to
here
necktie.
weren't going to load
So a
from a
neck
cartridge
stock,
box.
a waistcoat,
This is a
and a
shooting bag
jacket
and a powder horn.
becomes the three-piece suit.
So in here,
If I
you
would take
have
off
these
my
rollers,
waistcoat, I would have been considered naked,
and in here you
Well,
carry
at
your
least
gun powder.
underdressed.
undressed,
This is all
Because a
script
fine
shot.
gentleman
This is
would have worn a
actually in
waistcoat
the Valley of New York.
at all times, in
And
public, at home.
horns
It
looked like
was
this in the 18th century.
expected
This is a
to
big
be
cow
worn.
horn. And a very talented
Got his
individual would
watch
script shot this, and this is a called a map
attached.
horn. Map
Oh,
horn
your pick and wick is on your
a
jacket.
militia company, one man in a militia company
She has a
on a
pick-
map horn in the area that they patrol. So I would
Gun
carry
cleaning
this
equipment,
on the captain.
kept it close by.
This horn. And if I
Yeah,
was
because if
killed,
you're out in the middle of the field and
next
you pull the
subordinate
trigger, you
officer
go
would
poof,
take this off
you
of
didn't
me,
get the bang,
and it becomes
the
first
pick,
horn. But it
you
has
can put
every
into
river, every white town,
Actually, that's
every
private
native village
show
on
you.
it, everything. And this is from 1760, so this is what the Hudson Valley looked like in 1760 as far
This
as
is this
and
little
part
hole
of
here is the touch hole.
but this is
So when you load the weapon, you put powder in here and close this. The flint strikes the steel, lights this on fire, the fire goes through the hole, lights the other powder on fire, and that's what makes the gun fire. So you had to have a
you would carry
pick
these
to
two
make
things
sure that
together.
your touch
If I
hole was
wasn't carrying
open,
a cartridge box on this shoulder,
and a
I would
whisk
have this
to clean out your
over
pan,
this shoulder.
so that you're sure you get a good fire every time you pull the trigger.
You could either have
This
two
is a
bags
musket
of
tool.
corn, or
You
could
can
have
also
a bag
use
of
this as a
cartridge
pick,
box.
but you can use this end to nap
This
the
is
flint
slow
with
to load.
if you don't get a good flash.
That's really
And then if you need to adjust your flint or change your flint, you have a screwdriver on the end.
this,
So
not so fast.
Good multi-purpose tool.
absolutely, absolutely. So
That.
And I taught in my classroom that the war began with the Boston Massacre.
Right. Well, it really did, because that was the, that was
First
the
time
point.
the British did not want a war here. They did not want a war for a couple of reasons. First of all, they hated the colonies. They didn't like the weather. They were 3,000 miles away from home. Some of the British soldiers had been here since the onset of the 7 Years' War, known commonly as the French Indian War. They didn't like it here. They wanted to get home as soon as possible. So they were under strict orders. You are not going to fire upon the Americans, because once that first shot is fired and an American dies, there's no turning back. For the Boston Massacre on March 5th, one British soldier is on guard duty at Governor Hutchinson's warehouse in downtown Boston. He's attacked by a mob of about 100 drunk Sons of Liberty and city criminals. for
Oh,
lack of
yeah,
a better
they were
description. They were throwing ice balls, bottles. Some of the ice balls had nails in them. The soldier fired his musket in the air, which is a scream for help.
Yeah.
Probably 10 other soldiers under the command of Sergeant Preston shows up. They were ordered, do not fire. They were being told, do not fire. Now they had their muskets lowered with their bayonets, which is going to keep the
People
mob
at bay.
But the soldier in the far right, from what has been written about, only heard the word fire. So that British soldier pulled the trigger, which the other men opened fire. 5 guys dropped dead, couple wounded, and they scattered. Well, it's happened. Now that's 1770. Lexington's April of 1775, and you had the Boston Tea Party in December of 73. It progressively, and it was all in Massachusetts.
Yep.
The hotheads
Yeah,
in
Massachusetts was the hotbed of the colonies. None of the other colonies wanted to go to war. In fact, when they were debating at the Continental Congress whether they should claim independence, most of them didn't want to do it. South Carolina didn't want to do it. New York kept abstaining from the vote. Virginia wanted to go. Massachusetts, of course, but most of the colonies didn't want to go to war because, you go into war against the most powerful army in the world.
Yeah.
And we don't even have an army.
Let alone a navy.
Yeah, right. So, and they ended up talking South Carolina, or New York actually did abstain from the vote on the Declaration of Independence. New York never voted to become independent. They abstained, so it had to be unanimous. So there were 12 voted yes, and New York
One
voted
abstention.
abstention, so it was 12-0. that's why the Declaration was passed.
That's the easy part. Now all we had to do was win the war.
Well, yeah. The easy part was saying I want to be free. The hard part was winning. So, yeah, it's a very interesting time.
And, you know,
Oh, yeah.
we you know, the last several sentences of the Declaration of Independence have always had the most powerful for me. With firm reliance upon divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then they signed their names. They are willing to sacrifice everything they had
And they did.
on the promise of this document. When they signed it, even though Franklin may or may never said the following, and I quote, "Gentlemen, we must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall each hang separately," unquote, indicating that, you know, we lose this war, we got our death warrant signed. And you think, what, you got Jefferson, John Adams, two
Hancock.
future presidents,
Yep.
Hancock, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, the Lees of Virginia, some of the finest gentlemen and educated men of the colonies would have been the first to hang.
Well, what, 6 did die
Yeah.
during the war. They were captured and tortured, killed
A
under.
lot of the families lost property,
everything. Yep.
suffered in jail.
Yep. The interesting thing was the British decided not to attack Mount Vernon or Monticello, even though Washington. I mean, why not go to Mount Vernon, capture Martha, end the war? You know, George, we're going to kill her if you don't. You know, and they never did. And it would have been easy to do because, you know, I mean, in Monticello the same way. Thomas Jefferson's house was ripe for the pickings, and they didn't do it. Now,
And they did go to Monticello.
Right.
I mean, Jefferson was lucky enough to escape.
right, he knew they were coming, so he left, but they didn't destroy it. But, you know, they were bivouacked in Benjamin Franklin's house in Philadelphia. British soldiers stayed in Jefferson's house, or not, in Ben Franklin's house.
Was it Guilford Courthouse where Washington was nearly shot by British?
Guilford, yep, at Guilfoyle Courthouse, he was on his horse with his back to one of Ferguson's riflemen.
Yeah.
And they did have rifles in the British Army, but they're very, very few and far between. The rifleman had a bead on an officer, but he didn't know who it was, but he didn't pull the trigger because shooting a man in the back wasn't chivalrous. So he let him go, and it was George Washington. Could have ended the war with that one shot. I mean, literally. Washington never got shot, never got injured during the war. His clothes had bullet holes in them. He had horses shot out from under him, but he never physically was wounded. And they were, I mean, you know, they were shooting him just like everybody else. So,
and many times he was in front of his men,
he was
leading.
Yeah, he was blessed. Providence was looking out for George Washington. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's no way.
His first Braddock's ambush.
Well, Braddock's defeat in the French and Indian War, almost everybody was wiped out except Washington. And his clothes
Captain William Crawford.
Yep.
His second in command.
Yeah, and I mean holes all through his clothes. He had 3 horses shot out from under him, and he was never touched, and he survived it. Where 95% of the men never survived that battle.
Crazy.
So yeah, it was crazy.
And there was an Indian chief, one of the attacking tribes at that ambush, that would meet President Washington later in New York City. He said, several of my braves had you targeted, and they pulled the trigger of their weapons, and everyone missed. And this is from point blank range.
Yeah.
And that chief said, the Great Spirit was upon you.